Good morning, my fellow treasure hunters and explorers. Today I'd like to talk about the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred box that was created by the Israelites that went before them into battle and was kept in their temples, and talk a little bit about that Ark and where I think it is today. I'd like to read here just a brief synopsis of what the Ark is and where it's talked about in the Bible and in history. An oblong chest of acacia or shittim wood overlaid with gold, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 broad and high, made by Moses at God's command in Exodus 25. It was the oldest and most sacred religious symbol of the Israelites, and the mercy seat which formed its covering was regarded as the earthly dwelling place of Jehovah. Exodus 25:22 talks about that. The ark was fitted with rings and staves by which it was carried. Prayers were recited before it moved or rested. And that's in Numbers 10:35 and 36. During its progress, it was treated with the greatest reverence. According to 1 Kings 8 and 9, it contained only the tables of the law, the 10 Commandments. But in Hebrews 9, it is said to have contained the pot of manna and Aaron's rod that budded, which had been ordered to be kept before the testimony. And that's in Exodus 16:32-34, Numbers 17:10. Also in Exodus 25:16 and 40:20. The usual resting place of the ark was the Holy of Holies. It led the way at the passage of Jordan in Joshua 3:3. It was present at the capture of Jericho in Joshua 6. And during the conquest of Canaan, it seemed to have been kept at Gilgal. It was present at the solemn service held at Ebal. Later it was removed to Shiloh. That's in 1 Samuel 3:3. In the days of Eli, it was captured by the Philistines, who sent it back to Beth-shemesh. And as a note here, when you read what happened to the Philistines while they had the ark in their possession, you'll know exactly why they sent it back. They had a really bad time. Whence it was taken to Kirjath Jearim or Baal of Judah. Thence it was brought to by David to Jerusalem, the journey being interrupted at Perez-Uzzah. That's in 2 Samuel 6:1. 2 Samuel 6 and also 1 Chronicles 13:11. In Jerusalem it was placed in a separate tent, which David pitched for it, in 2 Samuel 7 verse 2, and also 1 Chronicles 16:1. It accompanied the army in the war against Ammon in 2 Samuel 11:11. But David refused to take it with him in his campaign against Absalom in 2 Samuel 15:24 and 25. On the completion of Solomon's temple, it was placed in the Holy of Holies in 1 Kings 8:1-8. Apparently, it was removed by Manasseh and reinstated by Joshua. 2 Chronicles 33:35. Okay, later I'm going to talk about where in the Bible it says that the ark is today. It's been adequately covered by many different individuals, and researchers have come up with different theories as to what happened to the ark. Some said it was found by the Knights Templar underneath the temple in Jerusalem, and from thence was taken to Ireland and eventually onto the American continent. While there's not any absolute evidence of this, there's a lot of little clues along the way that this could have happened. There are several petroglyphs in the United States that look like or seem to represent the Ark of the Covenant. The Irish have a legend or a historical account that they believe that the Ark came and was on a hill in Ireland. I know the History Channel has covered it many times, some of the potential places, the resting places of the Ark. Some believe it went into Africa, to the area in which the Queen of Sheba was from. And that has its own set of controversy and its own legends. You know, many people have sought the Ark over throughout history, as was mentioned in my early reading of the description of the Ark and its travels throughout its creation and history. There was a couple of occasions where the Israelites or some other person disrespected it or didn't take into account its power and were killed when they mishandled, touched the Ark, or looked into it. When the Ark was taken by the Philistines, it wasn't too long before they returned it. They suffered all kinds of sickness, illness, death, and so there's a historical precedence that the Ark was a sacred vessel for the Israelites, and that anybody that mishandled it or didn't follow the prescribed method of moving it, or the prayers and things that were supposed to accompany it before it was moved or before it rested, that serious consequences happened to that individual or person or group of people. The Ark of the Covenant was overlaid with gold, and it had cherubims that had their wings extended. There's many renditions or drawings of it. The term ark comes from the Latin arche, or chest. The Hebrew tavah, most likely derived from the Babylonian word for boat. So when we look at history, the term ark was used at least 3 times in the Bible. It was used with the boat that Noah created that saved him and his family from the flood. It was used for the term that they built Moses' sister built a basket of reeds and put baby Moses in there to protect him from the Egyptians. And it also is used in reference to the Ark of the Covenant. In the instructions for the creation of the Ark, this is from Exodus 25, says, "Then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high, or approximately 52 by 31 by 31 inches. Overlay it with pure gold, both inside and out, and make a gold molding around it. Cast 4 gold rings for it, and fasten them to its 4 feet, with 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Then make a pole of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it. Then put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law, which I will give you. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2½ cubits long, and 1½ cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubims are to face each other. Place the cover on top of the ark, and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law that I will give you. There, above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the covenant of law, I will meet with you and give you my commandments for the Israelites. And so, according to the Israelites, it became the actual resting place for God, or for his power among them. And when they traveled, whether they went to battle or whether they moved around when they were wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years before they came to the promised land. And with the eventual arriving in the promised land, the land of Canaan, and then Jerusalem, they made a permanent temple for the ark. But while it was traveling around with them in the wilderness, it was kept in a tent, its own special tent, and it was only to be handled by the Levites, those who were specifically chosen to perform the covenants and the sacrifices for the children of Israel. And so there are very specific commands that Moses was given, along with these things I just talked about, for how the ark was to be designed and what it was supposed to represent. So the ark was created after the pattern that God gave to Moses. It was created at the foot of Mount Sinai after Moses returned down with the 10 Commandments. And then the 10 Commandments were placed in the ark, and whenever they traveled with them. Traveled from place to place. The ark went ahead of the people, went ahead of the Israelites, 2,000 cubits, or approximately 800 meters in front of the Israelites. It was to stay 800 meters in front of the Israelites while they marched to a new area. And then from there on after, God spoke with Moses from between the 2 cherubims on the ark's cover. He didn't have to go back up to the top of Mount Sinai to talk with God after that. When the Israelites, led by Joshua towards the promised land, arrived at the banks of the river Jordan, the ark was carried in the lead, preceding the people, and it was a signal for their advance. During the crossing, the river grew dry as soon as the feet of the priest carrying the ark touched its waters, and remained so until the priests with the ark left the river after the people had passed over. As a memorial, 12 stones representing the 12 tribes of Israel were taken from Jordan at that place where the priests had stood. During the Battle of Jericho, the ark was carried around the city once a day for 6 days, preceded by armed men, and 7 priests sounding 7 trumpets of ram's horns. On the 7th day, the 7 priests sounding the trumpets of ram's horns before the ark encompassed the city 7 times, and with a great shout Jericho's walls fell down flat, and the people took the city. According to the biblical narrative, a few years later, elders of Israel decided to take the ark out to the battlefield to assist them against the Philistines. Having recently been defeated at the Battle of Ebenezer, they were again heavily defeated with the loss of 30,000 men. The ark was captured by the Philistines, and Hophni and Phinehas were killed. The news of its capture was at once taken to Shiloh by a messenger, with his clothes rent and with the earth upon his head. The old priest Eli fell dead when he heard that the ark had been taken. Obviously, he knew that it was because of the Israelites' wickedness that God allowed the ark to be taken. And I think Eli realized this, and that's why he fell dead with fear. His daughter-in-law bore a son at the time of the news of the ark's capture, and they named him Ichabod, explaining, "The glory of God has departed Israel," in reference to the loss of the ark. Ichabod's mother died at his birth. The Philistines took the ark to several places in their country, and at each place misfortune befell them. At Ashdod it was placed in the Temple of Dagon. The next morning Dagon was found prostrated, bowed down before it, and on being restored to his place, he was on the following morning again found prostrated and broken on the ground. The people of Ashdod were smitten with tumors. A plague of rodents was sent over the land. This affliction of tumors was also visited upon the people of Gath and Ekron, where the ark was successfully removed, where the ark was taken. After the ark had been among them for several months, the Philistines, on the advice of their diviners, returned it to the Israelites, accompanying its return with an offering consisting of golden images of the tumors and mice wherein they had been afflicted. The ark was set up in the field of Joshua the Beshemite. The Beshemites offered sacrifices and burnt offerings. Out of curiosity, the men of Bethshemesh gazed at the ark, and as a punishment 70 of them were smitten by the Lord. It said 50,070 in some translations. The Beshemites sent to kill Jehoram of Baal-Judah to have the ark removed, and it was taken to the house of Abinadab, whose son Eleazar was sanctified to keep it. Kirjarim remained the abode of the ark for 20 years. Under Saul, the ark was with the army before he first met the Philistines. In the days of King David, he removed the ark from Kirjath-jearim amid great rejoicing on the way to Zion. One of the drivers of the cart that carried the ark put out his hand to steady the ark and was struck dead by God for touching it. The place was subsequently named Perez Uzzah, and literally outburst against Uzzah. As a result, David, in fear, carried the ark aside into the house of Obededom the Gittite instead of carrying it on to Zion, and it stayed there for 3 months. On hearing that God had blessed Obededom because of the presence of the ark in his house, David had the ark brought to Zion by the Levites, while he himself, girded with a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all his might. In Zion, David put the ark in the tent he had prepared for it, offered sacrifices, distributed food, and blessed the people and his own household. David used the tent as a personal place of prayer. The Levites were appointed to minister before the ark. David's plan of building a temple for the ark was stopped on the advice of the prophet Nathan. The ark was with the army during the siege of Rabbah, and when David fled from Jerusalem at the time of Absalom's conspiracy, the ark was carried along with him until he ordered Zadok the priest to return it to Jerusalem. David gave his son Solomon the plans for building the temple to house the ark. He designated the weight of gold and silver to be used in building and furnishing the inner sanctuary. According to the historian Flavius Josephus, 300 talents, about 8 tons of gold, were dedicated by David for Solomon's use on the inner sanctuary. So 8 tons of gold were used in the Temple of Solomon. The copper scroll, which is actually made of bronze, found in a Dead Sea cave in 1952, lists 300 talents of gold as being hidden underground on the west side of a pool in the Valley of Purity. Okay, so maybe that was the same gold that was set aside for the Temple of Solomon, I don't know. During the construction of Solomon's temple, a special inner room called the Holy of Holies was prepared to receive and house the ark. When the temple was dedicated, the ark containing the original tablets of the Ten Commandments was placed therein. When the priests emerged from the holy place after placing the ark there, the temple was filled with a cloud. And in quote it says, "For the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord." In the days of King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah is the last biblical figure mentioned as having seen the ark. Hezekiah is also known for protecting Jerusalem against the Assyrian Empire by improving the city walls and diverting the water of Gihon Spring through a tunnel today known as Hezekiah's Tunnel, which channeled the water inside the city's walls to the Pool of Siloam. In a non-canonical text known as the Treaty of the Vassals, Hezekiah is identified as one of the kings who had the ark and the other treasures of Solomon's temple hidden during a time of crisis. The text lists the following hiding places which it says were recorded on the bronze tablet. A spring named Kol or Kal with pure water in the valley with a stopped-up gate. A spring named Kotel or wall in Hebrew. A spring named Zedekiah. An unidentified cistern, Mount Carmel, and various locations in Babylon. To many scholars, Hezekiah is also credited as having written all or some of the book of Ecclesiastes, in particularly the famous enigmatic epilogue. Notably, the epilogue appears to refer to the ark story with references to almond blossoms, locusts, silver, and gold. The epilogue then cryptically refers to a pitcher broken at a fountain and a wheel broken at a cistern. Although scholars disagree on whether the Pool of Siloam's pure spring water were used by pilgrims for ritual purification, many scholars agree that a stepped pilgrimage road between the pool and the temple had been built in the 1st century CE. The roadway has partially been excavated, but the west side of the Pool of Siloam remains unexcavated. So what they're saying is it's possible that it was hidden in this Pool of Siloam. In 587 BC, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and Solomon's temple. And they carried away all the artifacts and the gold away into Babylon. There is no record of what became of the ark in the book of Kings and Chronicles. An ancient Greek version of the biblical 3rd book of Ezra suggests that Babylonians took the vessel of the ark of God. But it does not mention taking away the ark. So some of the vessels, some of the artifacts, it records as being taken away, but it doesn't record the ark being taken, and that is unusual because that's the most significant artifact there is. And so if the Babylonians would have taken it, it almost certainly would have been listed as being taken by the Babylonians. In rabbinical literature, the final disposition of the ark is disputed. Some rabbis hold that it must have been carried off into Babylon, while others hold that it must have been hidden lest it be carried off into Babylon and never brought back. A late 2nd century rabbinic work known as Tosefta states the opinion of these rabbis that Josiah, the king of Judah, stored away the ark along with the jar of manna and a jar containing the holy anointing oil and the rod of Aaron which budded and a chest given to Israel by the Philistines. This was said to have been done in order to prevent them being carried off into Babylon, as had already happened to other vessels. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon, the same rabbinic works, state that the ark was in fact taken into Babylon. Rabbi Yehuda, dissenting, says that the ark was stored away in its own place, meaning somewhere hidden somewhere on the Temple Mount. And so being hidden somewhere on the Temple Mount would play into the Knights Templar, when they took Jerusalem, would play into the history or into the legend that the Knights Templars obtained the ark and took it away. We couldn't really mention the Knights Templars and the possibility that they took the Ark of the Covenant, without also mentioning the Holy Grail, or the cup that supposedly Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper, talked about as the Holy Grail or the cup of Christ. In another twist, the Holy Grail or cup of Christ is referred to as the offspring of Jesus Christ. And so it's been theorized that perhaps that one of the things that the Knights Templar were trying to do was to protect the bloodline of Jesus Christ, if one existed, and to take the bloodline as well as the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail, or the bloodline, and protect it from whatever they're trying to protect it from. But we know that throughout history that bloodlines have meant a great deal, particularly to the kings and queens of Europe. And perhaps the Knights Templar, perhaps that all these elitists, these noblemen, these kings and these queens attempted to obtain the offspring or the bloodline, direct bloodline of Jesus Christ, incorporate them into a special holy bloodline. Maybe the Catholic Church was involved in that. And I think that the Knights Templar, one of their missions or goals was to prevent this from happening, from secularizing or taking this holy bloodline and basically allowing the queens and kings and the Pope to get a hold of the offspring and to canonize this into some power or some authority beyond, the authority of man. And we see that's one of the reasons why all these people and individuals and Hitler himself sought the Ark of the Covenant, was to maintain or to get power over the people of the earth through supernatural powers over and beyond what the power of man. And so whether it's true or just fanciful imagination that the Knights Templars took this bloodline, the Ark, the Holy Grail, and took them to a safe place. It's talked about that they went to Ireland, and then from Ireland sailed to America. But there's been some evidence recovered in America that talks about this trip that the Knights Templars took. And in one episode of the history, I think it was America Unearthed, they followed evidence from documents that told where a ship that was involved in this expedition from Ireland to America, where a ship had sank. And they used the information from the document to actually locate the ship. And so, at least in their theory, or in their attempts to do this, there's actually some evidence that that ships left Ireland and came to America carrying, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant and the bloodline of the offspring of Jesus, the cup of Christ, the Holy Grail. We don't really know. But once again, there's also some very unusual pictograph panels that one is near the Hopi Reservation, and then there's a couple of other ones around the southwest that seem to very clearly represent a depiction of the Ark of the Covenant. So whether or not that was just by word of mouth, and they, by word of mouth they somehow received information about this and then depicted it, or whether they actually saw it, we may never know. But it just adds to some of the mystique and some of the mystery of the Ark of the Covenant. Many people have tried to answer the question of where the Ark of the Covenant is today, and anybody that's a Christian or that believes in the Bible and its teachings has to come to the conclusion that the Ark of the Covenant was something that was very special, that was a representation of God dwelling on earth among his people, and would have great significance not only to the Israelites but also to God, who had it created by Moses many years ago. We see from its time among the Philistines that it created great problems for them, that many people that touched the ark or looked into the ark that were not authorized to do so were struck dead. And so there was great power there. And so it's just fitting that in the final book in the Bible, it describes where the ark is today. And this is in Revelations 11:19. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and earthquake and great hail. And so in other words, from Revelations 11:19 we learn that the Ark of the Covenant was opened or seen by the angels, or according to the vision of Paul, in heaven. And so this is where I believe the final resting place of the ark is, that it has been taken to heaven by the angels of God, and that it sits in the temple of God, and that as it talks about the lightnings and voices and thunderings and earthquake and great hail, these are the things that are talked about in the great calamities that are going to be coming up on the earth when the seventh seal is opened. And so it's my belief that the Ark of the Covenant is in the temple of God, and that at the time the seventh seal is opened, the lid or the mercy seat is going to be taken from off the ark, and that all these lightnings and voices and thunderings and earthquake and great hail are going to come upon the earth as a result of the ark being opened in heaven. Anyway, in the comments below, and for many of your research, if you've come across any unusual petroglyphs or pictographs that seem to represent the ark, or some of your research or historical findings, if you have some unique ideas or thoughts or things that you've seen, please comment below, and please like and share this video so that we can keep doing these videos and presenting this research and searching for the mysteries and the treasures that are left here on earth. Thanks. Have a great day.